My friend, let me ask you something that may disturb the very foundations of how you see yourself. What if I told you that the very walls you have built to protect yourself have become the bars of your own prison? What if the armor you wear to shield your heart has become so heavy that it crushes the very spirit it was meant to defend? I have spent decades studying the minds of successful individuals, observing the patterns that separate those who achieve greatness from those who remain trapped in mediocrity. And in all my observations, I have discovered a profound truth that cuts to the core of human existence. The self you protect is the self you imprison. Think about this for a moment. Picture a young child, full of wonder, unafraid to speak their mind, to dream impossible dreams, to love without reservation. That child knows no fear of rejection, no shame in failure, no hesitation in expressing their authentic nature. But then life happens. The world begins to teach them lessons. Not all of these lessons are kind. The first time that child reaches out with genuine affection and is met with coldness, something shifts. The first time they share a dream and are told it is foolish, a small wall begins to form. The first time they show vulnerability and it is used against them, they start building defenses. And with each hurt, each disappointment, each betrayal, the walls grow higher and thicker. You see, my friend, these protective mechanisms are not born from weakness, but from intelligence. The mind recognizes patterns. It learns that openness can lead to pain, that trust can result in betrayal, that showing your true self can invite ridicule. So it creates strategies. It builds elaborate defense systems. It constructs a fortress around your authentic self. But here lies the tragedy that I have witnessed in countless lives. In protecting yourself from potential pain, you also shield yourself from potential joy. In guarding against possible rejection, you also block out genuine connection. In building walls to keep hurt out, you inadvertently keep love out as well. I remember a conversation I had many years ago with a successful businessman who had achieved everything society told him he should want: wealth, status, recognition. Yet he sat across from me with hollow eyes, speaking of an emptiness that no amount of success could fill. As we talked, I began to see the prison he had built around himself. He had learned early in life that showing emotion was weakness, so he buried his feelings deep beneath layers of stoicism. He had been hurt by betrayal in business, so he trusted no one completely. He had been mocked for his dreams as a young man, so he pursued only what others deemed practical. In protecting himself from the pain of his youth, he had created a life devoid of authentic connection, genuine passion, or true fulfillment. This man had become a prisoner of his own protection. The very strategies that had helped him survive had become the chains that prevented him from truly living. Consider the nature of a fortress. Yes, it keeps enemies out, but it also keeps the inhabitants in. The higher the walls, the less you can see of the world beyond. The thicker the defenses, the more isolated you become from the very experiences that make life worth living. I have observed that many people spend their entire lives fighting yesterday's battles. They armor themselves against wounds that have already healed, defend against attacks that are no longer coming, and protect against betrayals from people who are no longer in their lives. They become so focused on not being hurt again that they forget how to truly live. But what exactly are we protecting when we build these elaborate defense systems? Are we protecting our true selves, or are we protecting a false image of who we think we should be? Are we guarding our authentic nature, or are we hiding behind masks that we have worn for so long we have forgotten what lies beneath them? I propose to you that most of the time, we are not protecting our real selves at all. We are protecting our ego, our self-image, our carefully constructed identity. We are so afraid of being seen as inadequate, foolish, or vulnerable that we present a polished version of ourselves to the world. But this polished version is not who we truly are. It is a performance, a character we play, a role we have assumed. The tragic irony is that in protecting this false self, we imprison our true self. The authentic you, with all your quirks, fears, dreams, and contradictions, becomes locked away behind walls of pretense. The real you, with your unique gifts and perspectives, suffocates beneath layers of what you think others want to see. Think about the last time you were in a group of people and held back from saying what you really thought because you feared judgment. Think about the dreams you have never pursued because you worried about failing. Think about the love you have never expressed because you were afraid of rejection. In each of these moments, you were choosing protection over possibility, safety over authenticity. I am not suggesting that all protection is wrong or that you should live without any boundaries. Wisdom involves discernment. There are times when caution is appropriate, when privacy serves a purpose, when protection is necessary. But the question you must ask yourself is this: am I protecting myself from genuine danger, or am I protecting myself from the very experiences that could lead to growth, connection, and fulfillment? The difference between healthy boundaries and prison walls is this: boundaries are permeable. They can be adjusted based on circumstances. They protect without completely isolating. Prison walls, on the other hand, are rigid. They cut off all possibility of genuine connection. They are born from fear rather than wisdom. Let me share with you another story that illustrates this principle. I once knew a woman who had been deeply hurt in her first marriage. Her husband had betrayed her trust in the most painful way possible. When she eventually found love again, she brought all the lessons from that first relationship into the second. She questioned every late night at work, scrutinized every friendly conversation her new partner had with other women, and held back pieces of her heart that she swore would never be vulnerable again. What she thought was wisdom was actually fear masquerading as protection. Her new partner, who had done nothing to deserve such suspicion, gradually began to feel the walls she had built. The relationship, which could have been a source of healing and joy, became strained under the weight of defenses that were meant for someone else, for a different time, for a different situation. This woman was fighting ghosts. She was protecting herself from a threat that existed only in her memory, and in doing so, she was sabotaging her present and her future. The very walls that were supposed to keep her safe were keeping her from the love and connection she desperately wanted. The truth is that life will hurt you. This is not a pessimistic statement, but a realistic one. If you live with an open heart, you will experience pain. If you pursue your dreams, you will face rejection. If you love deeply, you will risk loss. But here is what I have learned: the pain of living authentically is far less destructive than the slow death of living behind walls. When you experience pain while living openly, it is acute but temporary. It teaches you about resilience, about the depth of your capacity to feel, about the preciousness of genuine connection. But when you live behind protective walls, the pain is chronic and persistent. It is the dull ache of a life half-lived, of potential unrealized, of connections missed. Moreover, the very pain you are trying to avoid by staying protected often becomes intensified by your protection. Loneliness is more painful when you know it is self-imposed. Regret is more bitter when you realize you chose safety over possibility. The fear of rejection becomes more powerful when you never test it against reality. I have noticed that people who live behind protective walls often develop a peculiar relationship with suffering. Because they have not learned to process and move through emotional pain in healthy ways, small hurts become magnified. A minor slight feels like a major betrayal. A small failure feels like complete inadequacy. The very sensitivity they are trying to protect becomes hyperactive and painful. On the other hand, those who have learned to live with open hearts, who have experienced pain and worked through it, develop a kind of emotional strength that no wall can provide. They learn that they can survive hurt, that they can heal from betrayal, that they can rise from failure. This knowledge makes them less afraid, not more. But how do you begin to dismantle walls that have taken years or even decades to build? How do you open a heart that has been closed for so long? How do you risk being authentic when the false self feels so much safer? The process begins with recognition. You must first acknowledge that you are living behind walls. This is not always easy because the protected self often feels like the real self. You have been playing a role for so long that it feels natural. You have been wearing masks for so many years that they feel like your actual face. Look at your relationships. Are you truly known by the people closest to you, or do they know only the version of yourself that you allow them to see? Look at your dreams and ambitions. Are you pursuing what genuinely calls to you, or are you following a path that feels safe and acceptable to others? Look at your daily interactions. Do you speak your truth, or do you say what you think others want to hear? The imprisoned self reveals itself through patterns of behavior. You may find that you consistently hold back in conversations, always leaving something unsaid. You may notice that you downplay your achievements to avoid standing out. You may realize that you rarely ask for what you really want because you have convinced yourself that it is better not to risk disappointment. These patterns are not personality traits. They are protective strategies that have outlived their usefulness. They are habits born from old wounds that continue to influence your present choices. The next step is to begin small experiments in authenticity. You do not need to tear down all your walls at once. In fact, doing so would be unwise and potentially harmful. Instead, you can begin to create small openings, little windows, through which your authentic self can peek through. Perhaps you share one genuine opinion in a conversation where you would normally remain neutral. Maybe you express one real emotion instead of the socially acceptable response. Possibly you take one small risk in pursuing something that genuinely interests you, even if others might not understand. These small acts of authenticity are like exercises for muscles that have grown weak from disuse. The more you practice being genuine, the stronger your capacity for authenticity becomes. Each time you show your real self, and the world does not end, you prove to yourself that the walls you have built may not be as necessary as you thought. But I must warn you, this process will be uncomfortable. The protected self will resist change because change feels dangerous. Your mind will create elaborate justifications for why you should return to the safety of your walls. You will have moments of doubt, periods where the old patterns feel more comfortable than the new ones. This resistance is natural and should be expected. The protective mechanisms you have developed did serve a purpose at one time. They helped you survive difficult circumstances. Acknowledging this can help you approach the process of change with compassion for yourself rather than judgment. Remember that the goal is not to become recklessly vulnerable or naively trusting. The goal is to reclaim your authentic self while developing the wisdom to discern when openness serves you and when protection is genuinely needed. As you begin to live more authentically, you will discover something remarkable. The very things you were afraid would happen if people saw the real you often do not occur. More often, you will find that authenticity attracts authentic people. Genuineness invites genuine connection. When you stop performing and start being, you give others permission to do the same. You may also discover that many of the judgments you feared from others were actually judgments you held about yourself. You were so afraid of being seen as inadequate because you believed you were inadequate. You were so terrified of rejection because you had rejected parts of yourself. The external world often mirrors our internal relationship with ourselves. This is why the journey from protection to authenticity is ultimately a journey of self-acceptance. You cannot truly open to others what you have not first opened to yourself. You cannot be genuine with the world if you are not honest about who you are in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. The process of dismantling your prison walls is not just about changing how you interact with others. It is about changing how you relate to yourself. It is about learning to befriend the parts of yourself that you have kept hidden. It is about developing compassion for your fears, understanding for your protective patterns, and patience with your process of growth. I have observed that people often experience a profound sense of relief when they begin to live more authentically. There is an exhaustion that comes from constantly monitoring yourself, from always being on guard, from perpetually performing. When you begin to let down these defenses, when you start to show up as you really are, there is a lightness that emerges. Energy that was once devoted to maintaining walls can now be directed toward creating, connecting, and contributing. But perhaps the most beautiful discovery is that your authentic self, the one you have kept hidden for so long, is far more lovable than the protected version you have been presenting to the world. The quirks you thought were flaws may be the very things that make you unique and interesting. The vulnerabilities you thought were weaknesses may be the bridges that connect you most deeply with others. The dreams you thought were foolish may be the very visions that can guide you toward a life of meaning and fulfillment. The self you protect is indeed the self you imprison. But the reverse is also true. The self you free is the self you empower. When you release your authentic nature from behind protective walls, you unlock possibilities that you never knew existed. You open doorways to experiences that your protected self could never have imagined. You step into a version of your life that is richer, deeper, and more meaningful than anything you could create while hiding behind defenses. This does not mean that life becomes easy or that you will never experience pain again. It means that you will face life's challenges as your whole self rather than as a fragment of who you really are. You will navigate difficulties with the full range of your capabilities rather than just the narrow band that feels safe. You will experience both joy and sorrow more fully, and in doing so, you will live more completely. As I reflect on this truth, I am reminded of a garden that has been enclosed by high walls for many years. The plants inside may be safe from wind and weather, but they are also deprived of the full spectrum of sunlight. They cannot spread their roots widely or reach toward the open sky. They remain small, confined, limited by the very walls that were meant to protect them. But when those walls come down, when the garden is open to the elements, something miraculous happens. The plants may face storms they have never encountered, but they also receive light they have never known. They can spread and grow and flourish in ways that were impossible within the confined space. Some plants may not survive the transition, but those that do become stronger, more vibrant, more fully themselves than they ever could have been behind walls. You, my friend, are that garden. Your authentic self is those plants yearning to grow. The walls you have built may feel protective, but they are actually limiting your potential. The question is not whether you will face challenges if you tear them down. The question is whether you will continue to live a diminished life by keeping them up. The choice is yours, and it is a choice you make not once, but every day, in every interaction, in every decision about how much of your real self you are willing to share with the world. Will you remain a prisoner of your own protection, or will you find the courage to be free? In this very moment, as you hear these words, your authentic self is stirring behind whatever walls you have built. It is reminding you of dreams you have deferred, of love you have withheld, of truth you have left unspoken. It is calling you toward a life of greater authenticity, deeper connection, and more profound fulfillment. The self you protect is the self you imprison. But today, if you choose, you can begin the process of setting that self free. The key to your prison has always been in your hands. The only question is whether you will finally use it.